It's your Wednesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand, glad to be back in the big chair for another day. Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune columnist, will join me here in just a little bit to talk Vikings primarily. Wanted to get his thoughts on kind of an off-season to-do list, maybe some reasons he sees for optimism going into the off-season, some things he definitely thinks the Vikings need to clean up. It's a weird place to be, right? I don't feel like a lot of teams come off of a 13-4 season with as many questions as the Vikings have right now. But that's the reality. That's where they are. That's where they find themselves because of an unexpected season of success, one in which the record didn't necessarily match how they played on the field all the time, but one nevertheless, 13-4, you don't diminish the wins and losses of a team. If you're going to say a team that goes 8-9 got what it deserved, even if they played better than that, you got to say a 13-4 team got what they deserve too. But you can also say that's not sustainable. So they have a weird offseason where you look at it and you say a lot of things would really have to go right for them next year just to win 10 or 11 games, I think, just because everybody's a year older. The offense, I feel like, has got some really good pieces, but there's some questions there. They don't have a lot of draft capital. They don't have a lot of wiggle room financially. So it feels like the reckoning to a certain degree is coming. It just is a matter of how they navigate that and how good they can be along the way. So Chip and I will get into a lot of those things. Chip and I will also talk Timberwolves, and I want to get into a St. Thomas story, a big donation for St. Thomas Athletics at the end of the show as well. But as promised, what did I miss? We'll be focusing on the Wolves as well. I know I talk a lot of Wolves on the show, drive some of my friends crazy, but they are at a very interesting point in time. I know the Wild played. I know we got a lot of other stuff to get to, but the Wild will get their due at a certain point here. The Wolves, though, they're at this kind of critical point where they're just coming off this loss to the Utah Jazz, where Walker Kessler, the player who was almost like a throw-in in the Rudy Gobert trade, or at least felt like it with all the other draft picks, all the other players going out to Utah in that massive deal, scores 20 points and has 21 rebounds. The Jazz win by a point the other night. The Wolves are 22-23, a game under 500, and you're just looking at it saying, okay, what's going on here? What exactly is kind of the big picture here? And I found myself kind of going back and thinking about how we got to this point, kind of what this season was supposed to be, what this building process was supposed to look like. And I found myself going back to the introductory news conference for Timberwolves president of basketball operations, Tim Connelly. It was in late May, and the very first thing that he said, his opening statement, I want to play a portion of that for you right now because I found it very interesting.
You're excited, you're confused, you're scared, but as those conversations developed and they took on more substance, you realize that this place has an unbelievably special core. I'm here not to mess it up. This team is on the right direction. I think Finchie's a special coach. Sach and his crew of guys have done such a wonderful job making this such an attractive destination.
So right there, he's establishing that he likes the core of this team. At least that's what he's saying. He likes what he saw in how they built themselves from 23 wins. It was only a 72-game season, but the 23 wins a couple years ago to 46 wins last year. And he's basically saying, we're on an ascending path. I just got to get out of the way, make some smart moves, but don't get too cute. Don't get way ahead of myself. Don't get too fancy. Get out of the way to a certain degree and make sure that this thing stays on the path that it is going on. Instead, not that long later, makes that massive deal for Rudy Gobert. And you look at it at the time and you say, okay, he's making a big swing forward. He believes in this. You look at it and say, wow, the defensive rebounding last year was really a problem, especially in that Memphis series that we all watched, that Tim Connelly watched. Rudy Gobert will make a huge difference in that regard. It's a lot to give up, sure, but if they are going to be a contending team, if this is going to be a team that meets his vision along the way, then this is going to be a team that shouldn't be drafting very high. The draft capital isn't that bad. The players they're giving up are replaceable. You get it. This is maybe the missing piece. But it flew in the face of everything he said in the very first opening statement, in that he was saying, I'm here not to mess things up. That's exactly what he said. I'm here not to mess things up. Just get out of the way. kind of keep going on this path. And then later on in the news conference, maybe 5 minutes later, asked a question, he doubles down on that very same idea.
I think it's a team and organization that its best days are in front of us, and hopefully, I get out of the way, hope I don't mess it up too much, but there's a real sense here that this place can do something special, and I hope I can play some small role along with the people up on the stage.
So again, I don't know what happened between then and the real meat of the offseason, where it sounds like the Wolves were in on different players trying to swing a big trade. Maybe Connelly was going to make something like that happen all along. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he was being too self-deprecating when he said, I'm just here not to mess things up, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, but whatever happened between then and the Gobert trade clearly was a departure from the attitude that he carried in to that introductory news conference, or at least that he was trying to convey. Now, the last piece of it that seems like it's important to remember is this. I want to play this clip as well.
I don't know if success is always linear. I don't know if we're going to go from here to a championship. I think we have to be realistic about where we are and how we can get better. I think as long as we have world-class people, which we do, and an elite coach, we'll continue to get better.
Success is not linear. Now, that is interesting because maybe he looked at this roster, he looked at what he had to work with coming in and saw maybe that they were going to have to take a certain step back in order to take a step forward. Maybe, if we're giving him all of the benefit of the doubt in this case, maybe, just maybe, he was looking at this in the big picture and saying, you know what? I think we need to make a big move right now. I think there's something to do right now, but it might not necessarily help us right now. That maybe they kind of caught lightning in a bottle to a certain degree last year, and I think that's certainly arguable that they did. They caught some teams, they caught some scheduling breaks last year. Maybe they overachieved to a certain degree, but maybe he came in here thinking, look, we're going to be really good at a certain point, but we're not that team yet. Success might not be linear. You might have to take a step back to take a step forward later. That is the only kind of faint, optimistic reading I can have of anything he said from that introductory news conference or anything that's happened since then. And again, I get it. Karl-Anthony Towns has been out for more than half this season. Now Rudy Gobert has this groin strain that might hamper him for a while. You've had, D'Angelo Russell, that question looming over them. Some of their role players haven't done exactly what you want them to do. Kyle Anderson's been really good. I think Anthony Edwards is on an ascending track. Jaden McDaniels has had some good moments this year. Seems like he's developing into that defensive stopper you want. It's not all negative this year with them. What it is curious. From the point that he came in, Connelly, to the point that he made the Gobert trade, and now seeing how it's played out, you just have to wonder. You have to look at it and say, if his intent was to not mess things up, again, we haven't seen enough to say it's messed up, but we've seen enough to say it's not on a great path right now. So I'm worried, I'm concerned that the very thing he said in his very first introductory news conference was the very thing that he ended up doing. And again, we're going to see this play out. We're not going to say this is all messed up right now. We're not saying this is not salvageable. Chip Scoggins will talk a little bit more about that in a little bit here. What I am saying is I'm concerned. I'm concerned that this trade will go down as one of the worst in history. I liked it at the time. I called it 8 dimes for $1. That was totally wrong. That was a bad tweet. That was a bad idea. It has not been 8 dimes for $1. Walker Kessler has had a very good rookie season. He alone is a reason to make you pause, not just those 4 future draft picks, not just what Jared Vanderbilt could be doing for them, not just what Patrick Beverley could be doing for them, not just what Malik Beasley could be doing for them. Again, all those guys, maybe not part of the long-term future, but certainly guys who could help them in the short term. I'm not saying it's unsalvageable. I am saying right now, in this moment, it does not seem like the initial vision Tim Connelly had matched the vision he had when he made the Rudy Gobert trade, and I worry that the very thing that he said he did not want to do is the thing that could come to fruition.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
All right, we're in the Star Tribune studio right now. Haven't been in here since we got some new equipment. Chip Scoggins joins me, Star Tribune columnist, both of us in the same place in real life. The secret of the first 498 daily delivery episodes is that I've done most of them remote. I've done a few of them in here, but we got some new equipment. Sounds great, looks great, so I was excited to test it out. And Chip was so happened to be down in the office today as well. So, Chipper, how you doing?
This is fancy. I'm not gonna lie. This is high tech.
I like it. It's a nice room. I mean, the room is the same as it has been. We had equipment before, but the microphones have been upgraded. The mixer has been upgraded, and I'm liking what I'm seeing and hearing. Hopefully, you guys notice maybe a quality difference as well in the audio. The content, the quality of the content is always going to be there, but the audio quality may be a little bit enhanced. Chip, I want to get two things from you today. It's a tall order. I'm asking you to be the voice of positivity, so to a certain degree. We're going to talk Vikings and Timberwolves, two things that don't have a lot of positives, at least recently. I mean, the Vikings, I think, people were realistic about their postseason possibilities. I think the disappointment is that they lost to the Giants, right? Like you didn't want the season to end at that point, but there was always probably going to be this moment where this season of, charmed, well, whatever you want to call it, was just going to come to an end, and it was going to come to an end short of the Super Bowl because there was a lot of other teams better than them. But from you, Chip, what I'd like to know, and we'll get to the Wolves in a little bit, which would be the harder ask for positivity. From the Vikings standpoint, I've talked a lot of Vikings already this week. I want to hear from you. If you're thinking about the Vikings and their path forward, how do you – I think there's going to be a natural regression or a tendency to think that there's going to be a regression because 13-4 with the way they played this year is not sustainable. What is the path in the short term for them to still be part of this competitive rebuild, still maybe be a playoff team next season, be competitive in the NFC North when you look around and you see Detroit getting better, Green Bay still a question mark, a lot of salary cap questions. What can they do? What's your to-do list?
Well, I would say I'm more pessimistic, but since you put me on spot to say be optimistic,
you can do whatever you want.
Justin Jefferson, there's your optimism. Yes. There's your starting when you're starting off with a superstar, the NFL's best wide receiver. That's a pretty good starting point, right? I think their offense is going to be fine next year. I think it's still going to be highly productive. I think Cousins will be back. It'll be interesting to see how Kwesi handles that component, that part here in the next couple of years. But I don't think you have to start the succession plan after this year. I think you have Cousins next year, and then you figure out who's going to be your quarterback for the future. So you have the quarterback, you got a superstar wide receiver, you have a very productive tight end, possibly two. We'll see what Irv Smith, if he fits in there. But you have a really good left tackle, you have a really good right tackle, assuming he comes back from O'Neal comes back from his injury. So you have the pieces there on offense to be productive. You have to make some tweaks, obviously. What are you going to do with Adam Thielen, interior of the line, center? I think the interior needs to be addressed, but that's pretty much where my optimism ends.
So I mean, that means there's a lot of to-do list. The defense, we saw it struggle to a large degree in obviously in that playoff game, but a lot of the games before that. And I think the conversation, there was like a tendency to be kind of like maybe a little bit polite because they kept winning, right?
Well,
it was you don't want to rip a 13-4 team, but you could see just how much difficulty they were going to have. And you even wrote it after, I think, the Sunday game where it was like, we saw this kind of coming. We knew they had deficiencies along the way. So is this possible to make the defense at least middle of the pack in 1 year, or how would they even go about that based on salary cap and what they have to work with at this point?
Well, it's a complicated thing, and I don't think it's a quick fix. The thing that jumps out to me, Mike, is how slow they are.
Yes.
The overall team speed on defense, they're old and slow.
Yes.
Very slow. I mean, that has to be a focus for them. Is like they have to get more athletic. They have to be faster. And the problem is they have drafted so poorly on that side of the ball for the last 5 years. Who are the young guys you're optimistic about?
Right, that's the problem.
On defense.
Like maybe Brian Asamoah if he develops.
If he develops, he's fast. Because he's fast. We were talking about the other day. It's because he's fast. That's why he stands out.
Duke Shelley, I kind of like Duke Shelley, but again, that's not a draft pick.
No.
You're right. They've neglected the defensive line, and any draft pick they've spent on corner or safety has been hurt or we don't know.
Haven't panned out. And they spent a first rounder on Lewis Seen. We don't know if he can play.
No.
One, we're going to see how he comes back from this injury, a very significant injury, but there were no signs that he was going to be a superstar. I mean, he didn't win a starting job out of camp, and so that's not to say you totally write him off. He's not, but he's still unknown. You look at their corners. They were injured, but unknowns there, right? Booth, Evans. I mean, Evans showed some bright spots, but it's like, is he going to be right? Is he going to turn out to be a lockdown corner? Nobody can say that. And so the problem is with these veterans, and Kwesi's going to have to look at the core that everybody's talking about. I think Kendricks is probably gone. I think Dalvin Cook is gone. But there's other ones, Harrison Smith, Adam Thielen. I think they have a lot of dead money tied up in those contracts. And so it's not as I think some fans are like, well, this guy's old. He makes a lot of money. Cut him. It doesn't work that way. You have to figure out how much you're going to be responsible for on your cap if you do get rid of some of these guys. So, and here's the thing with Kwesi. He is going to have to draft really good the next few years because you're going to have to pay Jefferson like a quarterback.
Yes.
$30 million. Your left tackle, if he keeps progressing the way he's going, he's going to command a top 5 left tackle salary.
You already paid your right tackle.
And if you have Cousins on your roster, how's it going to work? I don't know that you can have Jefferson making quarterback money and a Cousins type contract on your.
Yeah,
I think it has to be either or.
No, I think
because your left tackle is going to make a massive contract too. Yeah. So in saying that, you're as Mike Zimmer said before he left, the roster's top heavy. I think it's going to continue to be top heavy, which means you can't swing and miss in the draft to the degree that they have. You have to find guys that are not just special teams players, but starters and guys you're depending on that are on their rookie contracts or on their first contracts.
Yeah, and to that end, like I've talked about on this show, I mean, they only have 4 picks in this year's draft. 1, 3, a 1, a 3, a 4, and a 5. One of that, I think Hawkinson trade influenced that.
You would do it again?
I would do that again. Yeah. That seems like it was a good idea, and he's going to be here for a while, and that fits what they do. And so that was a good trade. That was probably one of Kwesi's best moves so far, but his first draft wasn't great in terms of at least what we saw so far. And again, Booth and Scene were both hurt. That's a tough one, so you can't evaluate it fully. But Ed Ingram, even though he started, he was
not good.
He had a rough year. Yeah. I mean, if a guy starts, that doesn't mean he's great. Like T.J. Clemmings got a bunch of starts in 2015. Didn't mean he was good. Just mean he was available.
No, he was one of the lowest ranked guards.
Yeah, he was.
And Za'Darius, I think you would say was a nice pickup for the first half. Second half after the injury, do you bring him back at a big salary? I mean, this is a complicated untangling of a web that Kwesi has with some of these contracts, and also they have just missed so much in the last 2 drafts, particularly on players, that they don't have that wave of young guys that you feel like, okay, they're ready to step in and be starters now and be productive and help. So I don't think it's going to be a quick fix, and I think this team's going to take a step back.
I'm pretty sure that Ed Donatel is not going to be the one to preside over it, right?
No, it hasn't come out yet, but I can't imagine that he's going to be the coordinator next year. And what I'm curious about, though, is O'Connell married to that scheme and just picked the wrong guy?
Right.
Or is he open to anything as long as he gets the right guy? Because this is not – okay, Donatel, he's not going to be back probably or likely.
Yeah.
But you can't just say it's all coordinated.
No, it's personnel. Some of it's the players.
It's a big part of it.
They're old and slow.
Yeah.
That Giants game, they were old and slow, and the whole year they were old and slow.
Yeah, I mean, how many times do we see wide receivers just wide open and Vikings defenders chasing after him or take the wrong angle or not? Sunday was as chaotic as you're going to see a defense look, and just out of sorts and not knowing where they're supposed to be, their assignments. And so you need a lot of new starters on defense.
Yes.
Realistically.
You really do. Yeah.
And you can't do that in one off season, especially with 4 picks and not much money to go out and get free agents. So this is not a 1-year thing.
No, this is not a 1-year fix, but there's going to be pressure to sustain some of what they did this year, at least externally. Like I think Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell will have a certain view of it. I'm curious what kind of view ownership will have, because they don't want to be 6-11 next year, but they might be 6-11.
Well, and I would go to them and say, you're 11-0 in 1-score games. That's a complete anomaly. That does not happen in it.
No.
There's a reason why that was a record in the NFL. You're not going to go that one-sided in 1-score games.
No.
Conversely, you shouldn't be 0-11, but they tend to even out.
But if you're 6-5 in 1-score games next year, you're going to go down 5 wins.
You're going to go
You're going to be 8-9.
Yeah, that's with the defense that they had.
Yeah.
That's probably legitimately what they should have been. But they found ways to win games, got, avoided starting quarterbacks in some cases, facing backups, got some lucky bounces. So all those things contribute to it. And I don't want to minimize, their role in winning close games because that was important. I mean, it showed that there was some resilience there, but they won 13 games with one of the worst defenses in the NFL. That doesn't happen.
No.
I mean, it's an outlier. It's an anomaly. And so if you think that, we'll just build on that, no, it doesn't work that way.
Okay, so I think we clocked in at like 2 minutes of positivity and 7 minutes of not
Justin Jefferson,
and now we're on to the Timberwolves. Chip, that Utah game.
You're not getting 2 minutes.
Yeah, that Utah game. I talked about this a lot at the start of the show already. So I don't know how good they can feel about things right now, but it's kind of the same story as the Vikings, where if you're going to start with a reason for optimism right now, I think it is Anthony Edwards. Obviously, you still have him. He seems to be ascending to a certain level even more this year, and I think there's even more left in him as he gets even better. But I guess the bigger question is, do you see a path to where this Rudy Gobert trade isn't an unmitigated disaster, where it becomes something where you're like, okay, it was rough at the start, but I get the vision. I see where they were going with this thing.
No, because there's been no signs of it.
That's 45 games in. That's so disappointing.
And how many of those have Towns missed?
Towns missed 20? More than half of those.
They had about 20
missed 24.
Together.
He's missed 24.
Yeah, so they had 20 games together. But even when they were together, you're like, how's this? It's not working. It doesn't. Right. And you could say that's not enough sample size, and they would have figured it out. The thing that's been troubling to me is, and I agree with the positive Ant. Yeah. I mean, I think we can all see this is his team.
Yes.
He's the guy.
Yeah.
And I like the way he's responded to not having Towns out by and large. I mean, there's been some moments, but he looks like he's elevating and taking that responsibility serious and wants to be that guy. And he's still young. I mean, what is he, 21?
21, 22, yeah, he's young.
But how many times have we heard after the games, effort? Well, we don't. A couple players, we got to up our care factor. Well, if you don't care, why should...
Yeah. Drives you crazy. It's got to be driving Finch crazy. It looks like it.
He's the coach. He should...
I get, yes, absolutely.
And so that's what drives me crazy is like, since when do the Wolves have enough pedigree to say we can not care enough or we don't have to play hard enough? And it's... Gobert just has not made the impact that...
No.
And maybe it was overinflated, the impact he was going to make.
Sure.
That you plug, a guy who's, all the best defensive player and rim protector, and that's going to really solidify his group. But look at what they took out to do that.
Right.
And not great players, but players that mattered and made that team last year tough and enjoyable to watch and energy and hustle. And so... I don't see the path for it. I don't see, and then you see what Kessler comes in here and does the other day, and it reminds you, it's like, just take a sledgehammer to your head because, now we'll see when Cat comes back, and, and how that works out and how he fits back in, but along with, when it happened, we're like, okay, this, at least they're being bold. They're doing something here.
Right.
But there's also like, well, this is not how the NBA's played anymore.
Right. Yeah, two bigs together?
Everybody's
one of them who can't shoot at all?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's going one direction and you're going to completely the other. How's that going to work? And they promise like, we're inventive, and Finch has this brilliant mind, and he was telling us he was up all night on the whiteboard thinking about it. And it sounded good at the time, but then when you put it in practice, it's like, this doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
But more so than that, just really the lack of consistency and effort and hustle and play in defense, that really just turns me off about this team.
So if Towns and Gobert, if Towns comes back and we see a little bit more sample size that say this really does not work, maybe they still make the play in this year. Maybe it doesn't feel like the year is a disappointment. I don't know what could elevate it beyond disappointment. It doesn't feel like it's going to be a disaster at this point, just because they're probably still going to win, in the neighborhood of 40 to 42 games. Just going to be a little short of last year's win total. Could still be in the play-in round. The West is not great this year. But if you get to the end of this season, you say, that didn't work the way we thought it was going to work. Gobert's trade value is not great right now. Like, how could you turn around and viably do that? Do you trust Tim Connelly to trade his way out of this mess and then turn around and trade Karl-Anthony Towns.
No, and here's the thing. When they made that trade, it was not to tap dance into the play-in game.
No, of course
you
not.
make that trade thinking we're going to be a top 4.
Cat said championship or bust.
Yeah, you're making that trade. I mean, when you give away the assets that they give away,
of course,
this is not this might work. No, you're doing that saying, hey, we're going for it. We see this as a team that's going to contend for championship. So if it doesn't work out based on what Tim Connelly did, no, I have no faith that they would be able to fix it because what's your play? I mean, trade Gobert for
trade Towns. I mean, Towns is the trade. Let's be honest. Like that's the guy that's got any value. If you decided that those guys don't work together, if you decided that Towns has had enough time here where you don't trust his leadership, you think he's still immature, even if he's a great offensive player. What
are you getting back?
For Towns, he's still got value.
I know, but is it then you're completely rebuilding again?
Are you? I mean, it depends on the trade. If you get, I mean, look what they got for Look what Utah got for Gobert. I mean, they got players and
they're probably
picks.
Laughing right now.
Well, yes, they're definitely laughing right now. And I think Patrick Royce is taking the sledgehammer to them pretty good right now. So watch out. They're an easy target right now. But again, it feels to me, and this is kind of crazy, but like it feels like the only thing they have hope-wise is Ant and Jaden McDaniels to a certain degree. I think he's done some things this year where you look at him and say, offensively he's never going to be great, but he's developing into someone you can see in 1 or 2 years being on all defensive teams, and that's really valuable. Gobert is still a good player. He's just maybe not having the same impact you'd hoped he would. Maybe some of it's him figuring this out. The one kind of get out of this box and get back on some kind of path is, can you make a home run trade with Karl-Anthony Towns, I think. Unless we see some evidence when Towns comes back that this works a lot better than we thought it did.
Well, that's it. We need to see more than 20 games.
Yes, of course.
And you don't want to render a verdict before you really know. But if you get to the end of this year and it hasn't looked demonstrably better than what we saw the first 20 games, I don't know that you can come back and say, let's run it back next year and think it's going to be better.
Right.
Because it's so outside the box the way the game's played right now.
Yeah.
But if you're the bosses, don't you say, Tim, come here.
Yeah.
This has to work this time if you're going to do it. Because there's not a third swipe at this.
Well, I've talked about this extensively at the start of the show, and I played the clip of Connelly at the introductory news conference where he's basically saying, I'm here not to mess things up.
And then he blew it up.
And then like a month later, he blew it up. And, again, if we're being generous, verdict is still out. We don't know. But saying we don't know is a polite way of saying we don't like what we see so far.
Well, that's it. Yeah. So there was nothing that told us beforehand that this was going to work. And you're like, oh, man, if Towns wouldn't have got hurt, this thing was really going somewhere. It's like, no. It's like, no. What is this?
What is this?
Yeah.
Well, it seems like
is that optimistic enough for you?
Yeah, I mean it's realistic. I mean, like the optimism in this market right now, let's be honest, is predicated on the highest of high-end talent.
Well, it's
Kirill, Justin Jefferson, it's Anthony Edwards, it's Kirill Kaprizov, it's Byron Buxton, and it's Carlos Correa. Yeah. That's it. That's kind of the big high-end hopes that people have right now. None of those teams are probably in a spot right now where they are among the 5 best in the league. I mean, the Wild has been they get better since that start. I think the Twins have maybe a little bit of potential if pitching comes around. The Vikings have had a 13-4 year, but nobody thinks they're going to be, a 13-4 win team next year. And the Timberwolves are floundering. Like it's that top end talent. If they're going to elevate, it's going to be around them. That's a lot to carry on their shoulders.
Well, it's and the guys those players that you mentioned are superstars, and they are among the best in the young stars. But it takes more than that.
It does.
It takes more than
team.
that.
It takes team building.
More than that, and it takes teams being able to make savvy decisions within. The Wild are facing salary cap issues.
Yeah.
The Vikings have some real salary cap issues, and so it takes being savvy and making smart deals. And do we know enough about these new executives to know that they're going to be able to pull it off? No.
It's a good point. Well, Chip, I came into
Mr.
this...
Sunshine!
I came into this thinking we might get some positive talk. We got probably like 4 minutes out of the 20, so I'll take that. But we got to be realistic. This is realism time. It's an interesting time in Minnesota sports. There's a lot of different directions these teams can go right now, and that makes it interesting and fun to write about. So at least we'll have and to talk about. So at least we'll have that going forward. Appreciate it as always, and we'll talk again soon.
All right, thanks, brother.
Good stuff from Chip as always. I should never go into a segment thinking someone can provide a dose of optimism. You're going to feel how you want to feel. You're going to think how you want to think. You're going to have reasonable takes. Chip Scoggins' takes were reasonable. It's not a time where there's got to be a ton of optimism for either of those teams. Weird, like I said at the jump, because the Vikings are coming off a 13-4 year. I think there's reasons to feel good about Kevin O'Connell. I think there's reasons to feel good about the offense. I think the defense can get better. So I think there's definitely a path for improvement for the Vikings, even off of a 13-4 year. But there's certainly things that you look at a team coming off a 13-4 record, you want to feel a lot better about certain things than you do right now. So they have a lot to do this offseason. The Wolves have a lot to do right now. I think Chip articulated that pretty well. We'll see where they wind up going ahead and going forward. Let's finish with the cooler. University of St. Thomas got a $75 million gift for athletics. That is a lot of money. Lee and Penny Anderson going to help them build a big athletic complex. Sounds like it's going to cost about $175 million on campus. Hope to raise about $131 million from donations. So they already got more than half of that just in one donation from this one family, Lee and Penny Anderson. That is huge, largest in the school's history, one of the largest ever to a Minnesota university. So that will help St. Thomas with recruiting, facilities, everything like that. 5 years from now, I'm going to be very interested to see where the St. Thomas program is, especially in basketball and hockey. This is going to be a program that I feel can compete in those sports, especially basketball, men's and women's basketball with the University of Minnesota. How that plays out, how that recruiting battle plays out in the long run is going to be a fascinating chapter in local college sports, and I look forward to watching it and covering it. That will do it for today. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Lots of good stuff coming up again tomorrow. I'm Michael Rand. We'll see you then.